Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things College and Career, the podcast to turn to for all of your college and career planning needs. We are your hosts, Meg Gary
and Bobby Ryan,
owners of academic and career advising services located in Kennebunk, Maine.
We started this podcast to provide helpful information to listeners researching careers, colleges, or academic majors. Choosing your career or college is such a big decision, which is why our motto is, learn before you leap. Before investing a lot of time or money, it's so important to do your research and to really explore your options.
Each podcast will offer interesting stories and valuable insights that we think you will find entertaining and informative.
Subscribe to our podcast and you'll have it ready to go on your playlist every Monday morning. So, learn before you leap each week with us.
Are you interested in becoming a school counselor?
If so, then this podcast episode is for you.
Yes, today we have Nancy Simard on the show, the Director of School Counseling, or the Guidance Director, however you would best like to phrase that, at Noble High School in Berwick, Maine.
Nancy brings about 19 years of experience in the field, and she is full of tips, advice, and information about what a career in school counseling looks like.
Also, we get into Nancy's interesting background in drafting and design in industrial education.
Her path is super interesting.
It certainly is.
All right, so let's get to it.
Yes, let's bring on Nancy. Hello, Nancy Simard. Welcome to All Things College and Career. Thanks so much for doing the podcast today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Nancy. We're happy to have you. I'm really excited to get into this podcast and learn all about your career. But we're going to just start right off with, what are 3 things you love about your job?
Well, as a school counselor, every day is a new challenge. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that while I can go in every day and have a plan, for example, I may plan to have a morning of writing college recommendations, but I may walk through the door and find a student in crisis, and suddenly that's out the window and I'm dealing with what's in front of me, and whether that involves calling the Department of Health and Human Services or crisis response or reporting a sexual assault to the district attorney. I never know what my day is going to be. Right. So I really enjoy the challenge of not always having a plan set in stone. Now, sometimes that's really frustrating, but it's also the thing that I really enjoy.
I'm sure it throws a wrench in your day. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to get done today, and I only have so many hours.
Exactly.
But yeah, not going to happen today.
Yeah, and you just have to roll with it because, you know, when there's a situation in front of you, you have to deal with it. The other thing I like is I work with high school students. I really enjoy working with that age. It's the delicate dance of pay attention to me, what are you looking at? Kind of thing. And just
why are you paying attention to me?
Right, just being able to navigate that. Right. That's really, I love that challenge, and I think it's
Keeps
fun.
you on your toes.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And I think finally, the third thing that I enjoy is I truly get to make a difference every day because of what I do. I've had jobs where whether I did it or somebody else did it wouldn't really matter. It all came out the same. But I have control here, and I really can make a difference in what I'm doing and in the lives of others. So that's
okay. Well, those are solid 3 things. I understand why you love that about your job. I would love having the diversity in my day and in my clients or students because it's just a lot of fun, not the same thing.
A lot of variety.
Yeah, and helping to make a difference. You can feel good about your job at the end of the day, even though probably sometimes it's heartbreaking and emotional.
Yes, it certainly can be. You have to be able to compartmentalize those things and know that when you go home at the end of the day, that you got to leave it there. If you carry it with you, you aren't going to be able to do the job for very long.
Oh, I know.
I bet. I remember we were interviewing a clinical psychologist, and she was talking a bit about that, how you can't take on your patients or you're not as effective. It will beat you up. That must be hard, though, to leave it all behind and try not to think about it.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I mean, there are times when it comes home with me. There are certain kids that, certain situations you just can't leave behind, but I have to know that I've done everything I can do.
Right.
Yeah. In the time that I had with them, and I have to be able to let it go. I mean, not to say I won't check in with them first thing the next day, just to make sure everything's okay. But ultimately, I can't take every student who's in crisis home with me.
Right.
Although there are some times that I'd, like to take certain ones home.
And of course, you're not allowed to do that, but I'm sure that's exactly what you feel like doing with some of these kids.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it difficult to write college recommendations? I mean, how well do you get to know the students? And how many students would you say each school counselor has to manage?
So my caseload is a little bit smaller because I'm the director and I have a variety of other tasks. So I have about 150 students. The other counselors have probably between 260 and 280 depending on the year. And that's over a span of grades 8 through 12. So we have students in each grade. That's the way we divide it up, because to have the entire senior class for one counselor would be unmanageable.
Because now you're writing college recommendations.
Right. And that's all they would do. And they wouldn't have time to do anything else. And they wouldn't know the kids. So what I like about the way we've structured our program is students are assigned a counselor in grade 8 and they stay with that same counselor for the next 5 years. So we do get to know them fairly well.
That's a really good idea.
And we have a lot of programs in place at the school where we meet with teachers regularly. We talk about students who are in trouble. We do a lot of interventions and things to help students be successful. So we do get to know our students with issues really well, really fast.
That's great.
And then over the course of the 5 years, we do manage to get to know our other students pretty well as well. That being said, I mean, I think there are some students who it's hard to say something nice about them, and not in a
authentic way.
And I will never write a letter where I'm not being honest, because that's my integrity.
That's exactly right.
So I sometimes struggle a bit to find things that I can write about, and I'll rely on teachers to help me. You know, what are some strengths that you've seen? How can I phrase this in a way that's going to be helpful and not harmful,
but still being honest and but doing the child justice. Sure,
exactly.
Now I think it's a unique situation that it's 8th through 12th. Is the 8th grade in the same building as your 9th through 12th? Okay, that's why. So that makes it easy, because usually, not always, but often 8th is separate from high school.
Right, so that's 5 years.
So that gives you 5 years of really getting to know a student. Yeah, I like that.
I think that is such a wise way to set it up, though, so that they have them all 5 years and really have a limited number of seniors. That seems like such a
so you have like the same number for each class. If your number's 20, 8th graders, 29th graders, like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, depending on how the alphabet
I'm just throwing out a number.
Yes, it's roughly like that.
Roughly like that, right.
Something that has always interested me. So my background is in academic and career advising, and I was always interested in the way they set up school counseling, because to me, counseling is very different than academic and career advising. And although they can really play well off each other and feed each other, and together they can be amazing, they seem like such separate and distinct entities to me. And how does it work doing that all wrapped up in one?
It's challenging. I mean, there are 3 sort of veins of school counseling. So you have the academic piece, you have the personal social, and then you have the college and career. And what happens a lot of times is that personal social piece can really take up a lot of time, particularly if you have really needy students and not a whole lot of community resources. And so when we have that, we really work hard to try to fill that gap, because I would rather be the one that the student sees rather than having them not see anybody.
Exactly.
So we try to fill a void where there is one.
Yep.
We also try to make connections when we can to, out of school counseling or therapists or those kinds of things.
Right.
But there are times when that just can't happen for insurance reasons or whatever, parents may not want that. So we do try to fill that. We have a structured program in place. So in grade 9, we know there are certain things that we cover. We meet with all of the 9th graders. We go over what a transcript looks like. We help them understand what it means if you don't pass a class and what you need to do in order to recover that credit. So I think by having an organized plan in place, you can really hit on all 3, and they can complement each other rather nicely. But the beginning of the year is tough because we're trying to do all the college stuff. And then if kids come in crisis, then that's
out the window.
Yeah. So we're trying to juggle a whole lot of things.
And that kind of has to take priority, because by definition, the word crisis, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So are you the one at your school district, MSAD 60, that structures that? Or is it the way you have it laid out?
I've been there, since 2004. So however many years that is.
15 years.
And so when I came in, there was a plan in place, but I just got everybody together and we kind of broke it down year by year in terms of where kids are developmentally and what we thought they needed. And then we created the program based on that. And then we tweak it each year just to make sure that we're still meeting the needs. And sometimes we'll think, we're not doing enough junior year. What can we do to kind of vamp that up a little bit?
It's always a work in progress.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I know that you had a pretty non-traditional start. Not non-traditional, but you had a different start from where you ended up. which is people call non-traditional, but I say, hey, what's non-traditional?
It was just your path.
It's just your path, right. So tell us about how you started out. We know you went to Keene State College.
I did.
Yep.
So I think it's difficult to be 17 and 18 years old. I think it's probably harder now than it was back in my day.
I agree. Certainly.
But I remember the big question of what do you want to do after high school?
And everybody asks you that.
And everybody, you go
so
to
what are you gonna
Thanksgiving
do?
dinner,
Yeah, right.
it's everybody's asking
What are you
you.
gonna do?
And it's really funny because the holidays come around and I'll see kids say, oh, how was your weekend? Oh, great. And they've gone and just had well-intended people.
Right.
They're just trying to make small talk. And I always tell kids, don't stress about it. They just don't know what else to talk to you about.
Right.
So
That's right. Just trying to make conversation, show their interest.
No pressure. It'll all be okay.
Right.
But it does feel like a lot of pressure because suddenly everybody's asking you. And I remember being a senior in high school and having no clue.
Oh, yeah.
And being drawn to the field of psychology a little bit. I mean, that was something that always intrigued me. Mm-hmm. But I remember my family would say, what do you want to do that for? Then you're just going to sit around and listen to people's problems all day. You don't want to do that. And
at that age, what your parents are saying or your family saying is a big factor. They
so
can
it's like,
heavily
okay,
influence
well, I
you.
guess maybe I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound all that appealing,
Right.
I guess. So I remember I was taking a graphic arts class, and in this class there were certain units. There was a unit on screen printing and photography, and then one of the units was drafting. And another student and I did this independent study in drafting because we really liked it. We spent, I think, probably a whole semester just doing architectural drafting, which I thought, okay, I kind of like this.
Yeah.
And the time went by really quickly when I was in that class and I was doing the project for that. So I thought, well, maybe this is something I can do.
Right.
So when I had to go, have my one meeting with my guidance counselor back at that time.
Right. My guidance counselor back at that time said, are you sure you want to go to college? That's what I was doing.
Right. And my sister Patty said she picked her college from a poster in the hallway.
Yeah, she did.
Pretty Vermont little college. Looks good to me. I'll go there.
Well, we were slightly more high tech. We had this huge machine. It was some computer something or other back in the early 80s. And I remember going into this room with this man and took this little quiz on things that I was interested in. And then this dot matrix printer printed out this list of schools.
Dot matrix forever. Took forever.
Yes, it did. That I could potentially consider. And I remember Goddard College was on there for architecture. Mm-hmm. And that was quite a ways away. And then Keene State College came up with a 4-year degree in drafting. And so while that was a ways away, it wasn't quite as far as the other schools. And so I opted for that, much to the chagrin of my mother, who was very concerned about me going. It was 3.5 hours away from home.
Right.
And I was the baby of the family.
Like you're going to go that far?
Right. So this was a big deal. It's like, oh my goodness, you're going way too far. This is all too much. I kind of went kicking and screaming, like, I'm going to go. Like, this is what I want to do. Honestly, I didn't really know that was what I wanted to do, but I had to make a decision because everybody has to make a decision.
You expressed a lot of confidence to your mom anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I remember going to orientation and we missed the first session for some reason. We got lost on our way there. And then they were touring us around where the classrooms were, and they're bringing us into machine shops and welding labs. And I'm kind of looking around going, this doesn't look like architectural drafting.
Was this the first time you had seen them?
Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing. You just show up.
Oh, yeah. Orientation.
Yeah, orientation.
That's
bad
when you
idea,
get the
by the
school
way.
tour.
Don't do that.
No.
You always have
Don't
we always
that.
tell kids you have to visit schools. But anyway, I was there, and I'm walking around these places going, what are we doing here?
Right.
So unbeknownst to me, there are many areas within the field of drafting. I had experienced architectural in my little class in high school. I didn't realize there was a whole other realm called mechanical drafting, which is what I signed up for. Unknowingly. And so we're walking around from lab to lab, and my mother is on the verge of tears. Like, she's hysterical. And at this point, I'm not going to admit I made a mistake.
No,
because this has been
because you've been fighting with her over it.
Right. I mean, so I'm here, so suck it up, baby.
Yeah.
Here we go.
This is just what I wanted to do, Mom. Did you see these awesome labs?
So anyway, classes, they leave me there, and classes start. And I remember going to my first machine shop class. And honest to God, I'm lucky I didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, right.
I got myself a shop buddy, and he helped me through that. But one of the things that really stands out to me is I was sitting in, we would have 2-hour lectures and then 3-hour labs. Mm-hmm. And so I remember we were having one of our first lectures, and the machine shop professor is going on and on and on about chips.
Yeah.
And how blue chips are very bad. What you want is small gray chips. If you have long blue spirally chips, that's very bad. You can cut yourself on those. Those are very dangerous. Seriously, 2 hours on chips.
And you're like, what am I doing here?
I have no idea what he's even talking about. I don't even know what a chip is.
Nacho chips? What are we talking about here?
So
the blue Terra chips.
Yeah, the blue Terra.
I get back to my dorm, and this time we had one payphone in the hallway for an entire floor to share.
And no Google to look it up.
Exactly.
What is he talking about?
So I call home, and my brother answers the phone. He's like, "Hey, kiddo, how's it going?" And I'm on the verge of tears. I'm like, I don't know. I was just in a lecture and they're talking about chips and I don't even know what they're talking about. He's like, he starts laughing. He's like, okay, Nancy, when you cut wood, you get sawdust. When you cut metal, you get chips.
Yes.
I was like, oh, okay.
Right. Not so bad.
So that was the beginning of that whole process.
That's so funny.
I did that for 2 years. And so I did machine shop classes, manufacturing classes, sheet metal bending, welding.
Wow.
I remember being in a welding booth, learning how to weld. And this was like MIG or TIG welding, where you're in this individual booth and you've got this big hood on. And you have to strike an arc with the electrode. Right. But if you touch the table, you can electrocute yourself.
Sure. Oh my gosh.
And so I'm in there, and every time I strike the arc, it sticks to the metal, and you want to touch the table to pull it back, but you can't.
Right.
I'm in there screaming at the top of my lungs. Of course, nobody can hear me because it's so loud in there. So I think back to all the things that I did. I learned a lot. That's for sure.
It's so neat to see somebody go out of their comfort zone, though.
Oh, I was way
you were on the edge.
And so I had at that point thought I was just going to get an associate's degree in drafting. And towards the end of that program, I started taking more of the engineering classes, which I really enjoyed. And so there was one class called statics and kinematics, where you're trying to really figure out the mathematics behind why things happen the way they do. And there was a tool design class that I really liked, and designed all of the toolology necessary to make this little army can opener. That was our big final exam, but it was really fun. I enjoyed that. And I thought, you know what? I think I can do this work for a few years, but I'm not going to want to do this for the rest of my life.
You knew that?
I knew at that time.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, so I can go on for 2 more years in this, or maybe I want to look at something else. And I looked at the other degree offerings, and they had a degree in education. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, teaching might not be so bad. I can do this for a little bit, and then when I get sick of it, I can always teach. Right. And now, as I reflect back, that was really smart of me at the time, because I knew myself well enough to know that while I was enjoying this to a certain degree, this probably wasn't going to be it for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I didn't really know
pretty
why.
Pretty insightful at that age.
I mean, I couldn't really articulate why. And this was back around the time when computers were becoming all the rage. So when I first entered this, everything was, drawn on the drafting board.
I was just going to say, I'm sure half of our listeners don't even know what drafting is.
Yeah. Right. So it's essentially graphic communication. So you're drawing things up so somebody can build it. So
sure.
I thought I was going to go there to draw up building plans so somebody could build a building, but instead I was drawing up parts and pieces and learning, all about the American Society of Mechanical Engineers standards. Yes. So, and I had no idea about any of that. So it was really very eye-opening for me and a very steep learning curve. But it gave me some skills, and I knew that moving forward, teaching something like that would certainly be, I think, a little more interesting than doing it all the time, particularly with the introduction of computers. Now, when I was in college, we only had a handful of Apple computers in a room with, one big plotter in the computer. Exactly. And then
nobody had their own computers.
No.
And then in the drafting lab, it was all these drafting tables. Everybody had their own table, but we would have to take turns using the
plotter to plot out.
Yes. But that really took kind of the fun out of it, frankly. I mean, when you're drawing something on a computer, it looks, whoever drew it, you can't tell.
No.
It's not like when you're doing it on the board.
No personality.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it really does.
That's when I knew it would be okay for a period of time, but probably not for the rest of my life. So I ended up getting a degree in teaching as well. So I was certified to teach industrial technology, which is like industrial arts, which means I could have taught woodworking. I could have taught automotive classes, like the generic ones. But I couldn't have. I mean, I took classes. There's no way.
Technically, you could have, but
right on paper I could have, but I knew that was just not going to be what I was going to do. The drafting piece, I felt like I could do that without killing anybody. So
right.
I think you and Bobby have a little something in common. Wasn't that one of your first jobs, is designing tools? Or
well, no. So I am a mechanical engineer. That's what my degree is in. So yeah, all of this rings familiar to me. So my first job, I worked in several departments, but one was tool design. Yeah. So yeah, I was designing tools for fabrication.
So you guys could talk tool design.
Yeah, we could talk tool design.
It's been a while since I taught tool design, but
it's been a while for you as well.
Yeah, me too. But yes, did you then go into teaching? And you had your degree in
I had my teaching degree and I graduated. I actually had to go a semester longer because I had to student teach. And I decided at that time I wasn't ready to start teaching because I was too close to these kids in age, and student teaching I knew.
Right, yeah.
With discipline.
That's a challenge, isn't it?
To teach high school. I just knew I wasn't ready for that.
Smart move, yeah.
It was January. I got a job at a land surveying company in Portland, Maine. And going into this, I really had no idea what a land surveyor did.
Right.
But I had basic drafting skills. So again, here I am.
Right. Cutting edge.
Right.
Yeah. Going into the unknown.
So I learned about how to draw site plans and subdivision plans and really understanding, when you see that manhole cover out there in the parking lot, what's going on underneath it.
Yeah.
Wow.
What catch basins do, road design, the fact that it's crowned so it can drain.
Yeah.
Right. All things that you don't really think about until you do it. And that was fun, but I was living in Auburn at the time, and it was like a 45-minute commute, and that wasn't the greatest. And then I happened to run into an ex-boyfriend who was working at an architectural firm in town, my hometown, and he was just asking what I was doing, and I said, I'm working in the civil engineering department at this land surveying company, blah, blah, blah. He said, we're probably going to expand our civil engineering department, so I'll just give them your name. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. And a few months later, I got a phone call.
Wow, that's great.
So I ended up working for Harriman Associates, which was an architectural firm. I think it still is an architectural firm at Auburn, Maine. And I worked in the civil engineering department, doing civil engineering drawings some landscape drawings and that kind of stuff.
Isn't that amazing? Who would have ever thought when you took off to Keene State?
Oh, that's not me.
Yeah. What would have unfolded in front of you? That's amazing. What a great story.
And I was there at the time when we were really making the big shift from drafting tables to CAD.
Yeah.
And
AutoCAD.
So this was at Harriman that this was happening?
Yes. Yeah. And we didn't use AutoCAD. It was some other computer program that they had specifically for architecture. So there was very little table drafting. Everything was on the computer. And initially that was exciting because you're learning something new.
A new software.
Absolutely.
But after a period of time, it kind of got old and a little boring, not going to lie.
Yeah.
And I just sort of felt like maybe it was time to move on. So I had my eyes peeled for a teaching job. And so 5 years after being at Harriman, I ended up taking a drafting instructor position at Lake Region Vocational Center in Bridgeton, Maine. And I was there for 10 years.
Wow.
And I was able to teach mechanical drafting. So I split it up into 2 years. So I had kids for 2.5, 3 hours a day, every day. And the first year students would do the mechanical drafting, and I would teach them all the basics of the board drafting. And then the second year was architectural drafting, and I would teach them all of the we would start by drawing up the same house plan, then they'd get to design their own house plans.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, that's so much fun.
And then towards the end of the year, they would build a model of the house they designed. So I had this whole really kind of creative thing that they could do. When I arrived there were 2 AutoCAD seats at the front of the classroom and 16 drafting boards. Yep. So I could see that needed to change. So by the time I left, every student had both a drafting board and a computer, all 16.
Wow.
And I was in charge of maintaining all of that. And I am a computer user. Yes. I am not tech savvy by any stretch. But I had to become the tech person because when things broke, I had to be able to fix them.
Yeah.
And I was the person. So that was the part I really didn't like about that job, is that responsibility of making sure all these things are running properly.
They had no IT person you could call.
I was the IT person for my
another
program.
hat you get to wear.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the funniest things that, I can laugh about it now. At the time, I wasn't laughing. The plotter wasn't working, and so I had a call into tech support at Hewlett-Packard to walk me through what I needed to do to fix it. Meanwhile, I got a class full of kids. So I got 16 kids in the classroom, and there was one kid in the corner who had vagal syndrome, and every once in a while he would just get really lightheaded and pass out.
Okay.
And so this had happened before.
So you knew.
So I knew. But wouldn't you know it, as soon as Hewlett-Packard calls me back, I'm on the phone with them going through step by step with the plotter.
Right.
They're like, Mr. Simard, Ryan's in the corner. I was like, oh no. So I have another kid run next door to call the nurse, who then comes and calls 911 to get the ambulance. While I'm I'm not hanging up because it took me
on the phone.
Yes. So anyway.
Right.
Oh my goodness. They needed to follow you around with a camera, definite reality show material there.
Teaching was fun. I did enjoy it, but I remember sitting in my classroom one day, maybe 5 years in, and we had kids. At the time, there was this club called Vocational Industrial Clubs of America, VICA. It's now called Skills USA. I don't know if you've heard of it. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of technical centers have students compete in competitions, and so I was the advisor for that at our school, and we would always have kids compete, and
That's awesome.
A couple of times kids won. We got to bring them to nationals and those kinds of things. So all that was fun. But anyway, I was sitting in my classroom going, okay, I've done this.
Yes.
I know what I'm doing. Every day, it's kind of the same. And I was bored. I really felt bored. And while I really liked working with the kids, it wasn't so much the imparting of knowledge that did it for me. It was my relationships with them. I had them for 2.5 to 3 hours a day, every day.
Right.
And so I was seeing them more than they probably saw their own parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was the thing that really
kind of held you there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that maybe I want to be doing something else.
You know what's interesting so far in your path? I feel like twice now boredom has propelled you into a whole new thing. And so my takeaway from that is that boredom shouldn't scare you. It should be.
That's a sign. It's time for a change.
And it could be opening the door to your next
chapter.
Right.
And you've mastered so many things, and it sounds like once you mastered it, you just sort of got bored. When you were initially getting all the computers in there and all the teaching, the drafting and the Skills USA, when that was all new, it was great. But as you did it over and over and over, then it started to lose its muster a bit.
Exactly. And I think that's why I'm so happy in my job now is
because it changes so much.
It changes so much.
Yeah.
And so it keeps me on my toes. And when I think I've got it all figured out, something else comes in.
You can never get complacent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, understanding that I really appreciated the relationship more than anything else led me back to school. And so I started taking graduate classes in a school counseling program.
Okay, so where did you do that?
I went to USM. And
did you do that while you were teaching?
Yeah, so I was working during, I think about
how you did it.
I know. I have no idea.
Where was all that energy?
I know.
And my mom had just passed away, and my dad was not doing well, and I was kind of taking care of him at the same time. Yep. And then I was taking my first graduate class when he died. And at that point, it was like, you know what, I just want to continue to do this for me after that. Because I kind of didn't know what to do with my time. You know, I would come running home from school, go check on him, come back to my house, do 2 sets of groceries, that kind of thing. It was a lot.
It's a lot. Didn't sleep. Something's got to give, right?
So I applied to the master's program, got accepted, and then I was taking 2 classes per semester. So I would work all day and then drive to Gorham. So I lived in Auburn. I would drive to Bridgeton, teach all day, and I tried to work it out so I could get my classes on the same night. But sometimes that made for a really long day, 4 to 6 class, and then 6:30 to 9:30 or whatever it is.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It was a lot, but I did that for 2.5 years and got my master's degree. And then when it was time to do an internship, I actually got a paid internship. I wasn't expecting to do. I was going to do an unpaid internship at a high school in my hometown. And right before the school year started, I got a phone call from a friend in the graduate program and said, "Hey, what do you think about coming here and working here and doing your internship here?"
And
I thought,
paid?
okay,
I'm coming.
But I had to fulfill my contractual needs back at the school, so I didn't get there till like October. But it ended up being okay. So I finished up my graduate degree and worked there for a couple of years, and then I went to Noble.
And when you were hired at Noble, were you hired as a school counselor, I'm assuming, but you're now the director?
I was hired as a director back then.
You were hired as a director?
Yeah.
Wow, right from the get-go. That's impressive.
Well, you already had a lot of experience under your belt,
obviously.
And now your master's.
Yeah. And you also are the director of the Community MSA D60, which encompasses 3 towns. And did I say that correctly?
It's the coordinator for the district.
Coordinator for the district, okay.
When we need to do some professional development things and
for the council.
If they need something K-12 done, I'm usually the go-to to organize those kinds of things.
Wow, that's such an interesting path. I love that story. Would you have anything you could recommend to listeners, young people starting out that were interested in pursuing a career in school counseling? What advice would you have to give them?
Well, I would say, number one, make sure that you enjoy working with students, because that's key. I mean, if that's not going to do it for you, if that's not going to really make you feel happy, then this is not the job for you.
Right.
I would say that about teaching as well.
Yes.
I mean, even though the schedule might be enticing to some,
right.
It's not a reason to get
that's
it.
not the
really
reason to do the job.
students.
You really have to love working with kids. And particularly in this day and age, I mean, we have a lot of kids who come from really difficult situations.
Yeah.
And you need to be willing to see the good through all of their...
Right. It's oftentimes not the kid's fault.
Well, they're a product of their environment, and they're reacting based on what they know.
Based on what they know.
And being able to step back and see that for what it is really takes...
And sometimes you can be the change in their life,
right,
or the one positive. Yeah.
And I think I would say be okay with not being able to leave every day with having everything done.
Yeah.
Because you're never done.
Your desk is going to be piled.
And I think being okay with juggling a lot of things. If people are really prescriptive and organized and can't function if things stray off the path, they're going to struggle in this kind of a job just because things are thrown at you, and
so
you have to
be able to kind of go with the flow, flexible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was all really great advice for anyone considering going into college counseling or really any field that is related to working with kids.
And I think it's also just such a great story for young listeners or any person of any age that it doesn't really matter what your bachelor's degree is in. Who knows what's going to grab your interest down the road, and sometimes it's just a matter of picking up a certificate or a master's degree depending on what area you go into. But I think sometimes too much emphasis is placed on what you start out as a
nailing down that major that you're going to have to pick at 18.
Right.
And I would just say there's not one way to do it. There's no right way.
The other thing I would say is follow your heart, because back in high school, I was drawn to psychology. That was always sort of my thing.
Right.
But I listened to my family. I listened to my family. You don't want to listen to other people's problems. Well, here I am listening to other people's problems.
Right.
And you love it.
And I do. I do.
Yeah.
Right. Of course, you obviously do, and that's great. So I know you have your master's, and that's fantastic, but have there been other things that you have done since then to further your education? Any certificates or advanced training that you've done past your master's?
Yes. I mean, one of the first things that I did is to take my nationally certified counselor exam, and that makes me a nationally certified counselor.
Okay.
And
so what does that mean?
So what that means is I have achieved a certain standard in knowledge and skills, and it's a standardized test, so it just sort of tells people.
You have a certain level of knowledge.
Yes.
Do all school counselors need that? No,
not everybody has to do that, but oftentimes districts will give bonus pay for being nationally certified. So SAD 60 does a $2,000 bonus for people who are certified,
well,
for nationally certified teachers or counselors. So that is a pretty good incentive.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think it's worth it. Every 5 years, I have to prove that I've done so many hours of continuing education.
To maintain that
to maintain it. So there's an ongoing process with that. But I would want to do that anyway.
Sure.
Just
keeps
because,
you current and up to date. Yeah.
Do you have to work a certain number of years before you can get that?
No.
So it's available.
And actually, when you're getting your master's degree, and I was trying to figure out what the name of the test was, and they may have changed the requirements since I've graduated, almost 20 years ago. But there was a test that we had to take before we could continue on in the program, and the nationally certified counselor exam was very similar to that. It had a lot of the same questions. So if you've studied for one test,
you may as well take
the other one.
Especially when it's
just
fresh.
a little bit more brushing up, and you can go and take the test. So if you test well, and I think it's worth the little
extra. Was it a
extra.
difficult exam, would you say?
There was a lot of information.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where
prepared.
you walk out and you think, okay, I have no idea.
I know that feeling.
I think I did okay,
fingers crossed.
but we'll see.
I felt all right, but you never know.
Right. And there's another I have an advanced training certificate. I'm not certified, but this is in level 1 trauma. So we have a program at school called Multiple Pathways, which is geared towards students who struggle to succeed in the mainstream. So it provides more hands-on learning in a smaller environment.
Okay.
And I am the dedicated school counselor for that particular group of students. And we happened to get a grant last year that allowed 3 of us to travel to Baltimore 9 times
to
take this class in trauma training, and it was amazing. And it's very relevant because so much of what we see these days are our students coming in and sort of reenacting their trauma at school with their teachers and with, those around them, and really understanding what that is. And
So you can just recognize it more quickly with your training?
Yes, and so coming back from that, I did a training for the staff to, help us become more trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive, and that's sort of one of our ongoing goals at Noble High School, is to be a trauma-sensitive school so that we can recognize, a kid's just not being a pain in the neck. There are really some issues going on. If they're asleep in the back of the classroom, maybe that's because they didn't sleep at all last night because, something was going on at home. So just always assuming good intentions on the part of the student, and that understanding that what we see is the tip of the iceberg.
What would you say is the biggest issue with today's kids in high schools today? Biggest challenge that you see?
Drugs.
Yeah. Drugs.
I think this whole legalization of marijuana business is very confusing. And now that they have these Juuls and, kids,
oh my gosh,
kids can smoke without adults around them even realizing what's happening. And so a lot of times I feel like we're trying to teach kids who are under the influence, and that's
really tricky.
It's really tricky.
Yes, because the Juuls aren't just nicotine.
No.
They're putting marijuana, in them, and it's very difficult.
And it's very strong.
Yeah.
It's not the pot of 20 years ago.
Right.
It's very, very strong. It can trigger psychotic events,
episodes, right? Yeah.
In students who have that
trying
in
to teach
their
these kids,
right? So it's very difficult, and trying to help them understand that this isn't good for your developing brain is really hard, because it's in their head that this is all natural. It comes from the earth. Now they're going to legalize it. What's the big deal?
Right.
Everybody needs to relax, but it is a big deal, and we don't know what the lasting effects are going to be. I know the effect on motivation is horrifying. These kids cannot get out of their own way.
That's really scary.
And I think it triggers a lot of depression, anxiety, and then it's sort of self-fulfilling that, I need that so I can function.
Right.
It's
right.
sort of,
I'm all stressed out. I'm anxious. So if I smoke a little pot, I'm going to feel better. It's like, it's a full cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
That is challenging.
And we didn't have it to the same extent not too long ago because of the Juuls have made it.
That has changed.
I didn't even know what Juuls were.
They're like little vaping devices, but they're like the size of a USB drive.
It looks like a USB drive. Like if you don't know what you're looking for,
wow,
you would never know.
They
So
can do it like under their shirt, or obviously in the bathrooms. But it's very quick and easy.
Do they send off an odor, or that they're smoking?
I mean, yeah, but
it's disguised though. It's like tutti frutti smells.
Yeah, and you're like, what's that smell? And you're like, so it's tricky and it's very challenging. And I don't know where they go with that. We're kind of digressing here, but there's a lot of responsibility for the manufacturer of these, because California's banned them now, or San Francisco. I shouldn't say California.
It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out.
Because they're marketing it towards young kids with their
tutti
fruity flavors, but there's high concentrations of nicotine, and nicotine's so addictive, as we know. We had a dad that was a smoker, and it's that stuff hard to kick. Yeah, they're not smoking cigarettes, but they're inhaling vape from a Juul. So it's all scary.
So
anyway, that's you're dealing with all that.
Biggest challenge.
That's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
I think another thing is just there are some kids who we just have a really hard time getting to school.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. I don't know if it's anxiety. I don't know if it's, and we work really hard. We try to work with the parents. And that's incredibly frustrating because we can't help if they're not in the building.
If they're not in the building, yeah.
Now, does your school district provide a VOTEC alternative, or?
So we send students to Sanford Regional Technical Center and also Somersworth Regional Technical Center.
For me, it seems like not every child's cut out for the college path. Obviously, every child needs some foundation of education.
Right, and we believe in equity really strongly at Noble High School. So any kid who graduates from Noble High School can go on to a 4-year school if they choose to. We want to make sure that they have that.
They have that ability.
They may change their minds.
You don't want any doors closed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are very respectful of the different paths that they may take once they leave us. And so while they're at Noble, we work really hard to differentiate instruction, work with kids who aren't necessarily making it in mainstream by having the program like Multiple Pathways for kids to be able to get more of that hands-on learning.
Right.
And then we do have relationships with both Sanford Regional and Somersworth.
I know for Bobby's has a few friends whose kids just soared in that program.
Yeah, struggled in traditional high school classes and then soared at the vocational school. But they had to have that foundation. They still have to spend half their day
for sure.
back at the
it's
school
so important
doing their math and
so important.
as you say, making sure
Oh, that is a challenge.
Yeah, two big challenges.
You just wonder what becomes of those kids that don't finish school. I mean,
we work really hard to get as many kids through as we can. And even if they don't make it for the graduation ceremony, the week after graduation, we get kids to come in and, continue working on things so they can earn their diploma. Because ultimately, that's going to close a huge door for them if they don't have their high school diploma.
I don't know how much you're looking ahead at that age, but certainly.
Well, a lot of times it's all they can do to make it through the day in their defense. A lot of them come from really difficult situations, and it's a challenge, but we need to get them to see the future and help.
For sure.
That's one of our biggest challenges, is helping those kinds of students recognize that there is life beyond what they're in right now.
Right.
And their ticket out is their education.
So true. So true. And that's the biggest message to convey. Yeah. But anyway, I just want to change the subject a little bit. We just interviewed a young man that started a company called Going Merry. I didn't know if you had heard of it.
I have not.
Okay, so basically he has done for college scholarships what the Common App has done to applying to colleges. He's provided a platform where scholarship providers and kids seeking scholarships can all come together, fill out one application, have it populated, and it will match. And he's right now got,
9,000
high schools
and
on
he's
board.
working through the Navient system too. And
no kidding.
So, when kids are applying for college scholarships, at that time in their life, they're so busy. If they have to fill out one more form, they're just going to collapse. And so this has streamlined it. So you fill out a form, and obviously you still have to write specific essays here and there, but they also can say, all right, this essay works on these other scholarships, and that's very helpful. But it also helps the counselors because you can direct them to this instead of, they can create an account.
Right.
They put their location in. It tells them all the local scholarships. They're working with town after town after town to get everything in, and they're working with every high school they can get their hands on. In your position, you might want to actually just check out their website, and you might actually want to contact them.
Right. So he was saying that he would have a lot of school counselors reach out to him. They'd have like 20 PDFs. These are our local scholarships. This is what we always have the kids fill out. They would just email it off to him, and then they create a mini Common App just for your school, just for your area, where the kids in your school district can fill out this one common application and apply to all of the local scholarships.
Oh, wow.
And it prevents you from having to email them or photocopy them or whatever you do, however you... It's a
time saver on both sides.
And he said they can set it up pretty much in the evening.
Wow.
Yeah, if you get them. So just throwing that out there
Great to know. I'm going to write that down before I leave.
Yeah, Going Merry.
Yeah, Going Merry.
Like Merry Christmas, MERRY, but yeah.
Exactly. So you are a bar coordinator. So I had to look up what bar coordinator is, and I found that really interesting, but could you explain it to our listeners?
Sure. So BAR stands for Building Assets, Reducing Risks, and it's a program that is really looking at developmental assets. Have you ever heard of the 40 developmental assets? The theory is that the more of these assets students have, the more successful they're going to be in school and life.
Yes.
And so assets are things like, use of their personal time. Are they getting homework done? Do they have a supportive family? Are they motivated to get things done? So there's a bunch of questions that we can ask kids to kind of figure out where they are in terms of these 40 developmental assets. So this program is set up to build upon those assets, as well as really look at real-time data, which are grades, and to look at that and implement interventions that are going to meet students in need in a timely fashion. So in order for this to work, you have to have teams in your school, which we've had teams at Noble as long as I've been there. So we are doing this currently in grades 8 and 9 at the high school, and I know the middle school is doing it as well. And so every teacher on a team, for example, our 9th grade team has 4 teachers. They split that team into 4 groups. So each teacher has 25 to 30 students that they look at their grades every single week.
Wow.
And we have these forms where we keep track of their progress, and we list the students' grades. We list if there's anything kind of funny going on that we think we need to be talking about. And they'll come together as a teacher team and talk about things that they can do. If a student needs to make up a test or whatever, they'll take care of that themselves. Anything that they need more feedback on from a larger group, they'll bring to a meeting called Big Block, and that's when all the counselors go. So I'm there to coordinate the meeting, and then we have 2 school counselors, the assistant principal who works with grade 9, mine and all of the team teachers and the special ed case manager. We just kind of brainstorm. So we'll go through each kid, talk about what's happening with their grades, what the issue is. We'll come up with some solutions. Then we'll come back on a weekly basis to just make sure that it's just a way to make sure kids don't fall through the cracks.
Sure.
Another component is something called
sometimes
eye
if you
times.
catch them before
Exactly.
it gets too far advanced where you can't really turn it around. That's
Exactly.
such a great idea. Yeah.
And everything's written on this spreadsheet, so we're keeping track and we're holding each other accountable and making sure that things get done. So another component is called eye times, and this is a curriculum designed to increase the developmental assets. And each teacher will take one of these lessons. So there are things on, how do you make friends? How do you lead in a problem-solving situation? Like what's your leadership style? And then it sort of builds, and towards the end of the year they do things like grief and loss and heavier things where they've built some sort of trust within their classes. But anyway, so each teacher will take a lesson once a month and take maybe half an hour, 45 minutes of their academic curriculum time and teach the lesson to the students in their class.
Okay.
So we're sort of building in that social emotional component within the academic time with the intent that we're building the assets. So we've got the real-time data, we've got the social emotional curriculum, and this is really about positive intentional relationships.
Right.
Teachers,
it sounds like you're learning about the whole student, where you know about their academic, you know about
Exactly.
their emotional needs, and
Exactly.
and you're teaching to the whole student, not just
Yes.
Right.
I'm not teaching math.
Right.
I'm
You're not teaching
students.
math. You're teaching
Right.
students. Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's a really comprehensive program. And then if there are kids who we still aren't able to get quite
through
over
to-
the hump, we have a group called Risk Review. And that's a higher level group. It kind of allows teachers to just say, okay, Risk Review is going to take this one. And that's all the counselors. We have the school nurse. We have administration. We have district health coordinator. We have a student services
A real village.
provider. Right. So we have a ton of people in a room, and we're talking about these heavy hitting kids. And what are we going to do?
Right.
And we try to come up with some strategies, and a lot of times this is going to be more community based referrals and trying to figure out things to help these kids be successful.
Sure.
That's fantastic.
It is.
Sounds like you guys are doing amazing work. I wonder if there's as much attention given to the kids that seem to be okay and on track, or do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
Do you think their needs are being met as well, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of energy gets put into the kids who are very needy and are right in your face.
Yeah.
Hello, look at me, look at me. What are you looking at?
Yeah. What are you looking at? Yeah.
Right.
But I do think we work really hard to try to differentiate our instruction so we're meeting the needs of all students. But it is that middle group that we worry about.
Yeah. Right.
Because when you're trying to reach both ends of the spectrum, you also
because
need
those
to,
are the kids you could probably really save or turn around or really make a difference in.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will say that, this model really makes it difficult for anybody to slip between the cracks.
I love that.
And so
Yeah.
we'll do a lot of things like rating our relationships with students. So, teachers will take all of the students on their team and go through and rate whether or not they feel they have a connection with that kid. And if they
Right.
don't, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Wow.
And then we have like a little intervention that we'll do where a teacher will make it a point for the next 10 days to have a 2-minute conversation with them. And then see if they've made
so that
action.
keeps people from slipping through the cracks of the
It's almost like that sense of family or belonging, like that connection that
Right.
somebody cares, somebody's watching out for me, somebody has a vested interest in my well-being.
One of the quotes I read off, I went to the home page for the bar. I was curious. And one of the quotes I read that I thought was so interesting, I'm not going to repeat the whole quote, but part of it was, why is my math teacher asking about my English essay?
Oh.
Yeah. I thought that was cool because it's a group of teachers focusing on
Kind of
this-
like your parents would, if you had parents that really cared. Or
right. And your parents still might be doing that, but it's nice to have your teachers.
Well, and I think oftentimes just for a student to know that we talked about them in our big block meeting. Hey, I just wanted you to know we had this conversation. They're like, what? Who did? All your teachers and, me. And there was a couple other counselors. And
Right.
Your
We had a
assistant
whole
principal.
group there.
So we were talking about this issue. Wait, you were talking about me?
Yeah.
They're totally shocked.
Right. Yeah.
They act a little off put, but you can actually kind of see it in their eyes and smile. That kind of makes them feel good.
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today, Nancy. I think anyone interested in becoming a school counselor or just hearing your path of how you got there was such a great story. I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too. And you're obviously a passionate woman
Yeah,
about
I think
the children and what you're doing. So they're lucky to have you.
Noble High School's very lucky to have you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
What a lovely guest Nancy was.
Yes, we certainly have developed a newfound respect for school counselors and all that job entails.
They certainly are doing some important work, that's for sure.
They definitely are.
We are so appreciative of Nancy taking the time to come on our show to share with our listeners everything that they need to know if they are interested in going into school counseling.
Yes, she has excellent advice for anybody that's going in that direction.
She certainly does. So if you are still with us and still listening, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone.
We are so thankful for each and every one of you.
Yes, and if you enjoyed today's show, please just take a couple of seconds and subscribe to our podcast. With one little click, you will have our podcast on your playlist ready to go every Monday.
Yeah, and this one little action helps us out so much. It will help our podcast to grow and will help others to find our show. And we've included the iTunes link in our show notes to make it super easy for you to subscribe.
Super easy, everyone. So thank you so much to anyone that takes the time to do that.
Yes, we greatly appreciate your support.
And also, don't forget to follow us on social media. All those links are in our show notes.
Yes, they are. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day. And as a final note, anyone interested in learning more about our business, academic and career advising services, we invite you to visit our website, and we will include that link in the show notes. We assist people with changing careers, possibly finding that first job out of college, the college admissions process, selecting an academic major, deciding on a career, or things of that nature. You can check it all out on our website, Academic and Career Advising Services. We are located in Kennebunk, Maine. However, for your convenience, we also offer video conferencing services. You're never too old to change your career or to go back to college, and you're never too young to begin thinking about your future. We enjoy serving people of all ages.
If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast and would like to help us out, could you please leave a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts?
This really helps others to find our podcast.
We would greatly appreciate it. Also, to get all the latest on upcoming episodes, please follow us on social media. All of those links will be included in the show notes. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks so much for listening.